Hey everyone, episode 12 of the Tom Holland-a-thon, and today I will be watching Avengers Infinity War. I am very excited for this, not only because Avengers Infinity War is genuinely one of my favorite films, but also because this marks the beginning of the Golden Spider-Man trio in Tom Holland's filmography. Basically, when you look at all the films that Tom Holland has done, you'll see Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and Spider-Man Far From Home right after each other. So that's like 3 Spider-Man roles he played back to back, which is, yeah, I like that kind of thing. So I'm going to try to watch the 3 films as closely together as possible, but I'm still going to make separate videos. I'm very excited. I like all 3 of those films. Infinity War and Endgame I have seen quite recently, but Far From Home has been a while. I think I've not seen it since it was in theatres. Infinity War is great. It was my favourite Marvel film. It would have been my favourite Marvel film for a long time. However, Endgame came out the next year, so it was only my favourite film for like a year. I think generally speaking, this movie is better than Endgame. I think it is consistently better. Endgame has better parts and worse parts. Well, this film is good all the way through. But I'll talk more about that in my post-thoughts for Endgame, I think. Basically, I really like this film. Can't wait to see it again. And I will let you know what I thought of this film after I've rewatched it. I'm back! Avengers Infinity War tells the story of Thanos, the Mad Titan, on his quest to find all 6 Infinity Stones in order to wipe out half of all living things in the universe. And it is up to the Avengers, the Guardians of the Galaxy and Doctor Strange to stop him. This film was the result of 10 years of setup. I remember when it came out and YouTube was flooded with big MCU fans who made videos about which Infinity Stone we had seen already and where they were at this moment and what every single character had gone through up until that moment and where they were. The movie does a good job of telling you everything you need to know, and yet it is so rewarding for all those people that put so much effort into their videos. For example, people who remember Thor: The Dark World will know, oh yeah, the Reality Stone is the ether, and at the end it ended up with the Collector on nowhere. And then the movie shows that and tells the audience, so people who forgot or never watched Thor: The Dark World are caught up, but the people who put in the effort are also rewarded. So that's really cool. And the movie does so well in explaining everything you need to know that I actually think it might be possible to just follow the story if you've never seen an MCU film before. I think the hardest thing is keeping track of who all the characters are, but in terms of like the story, I don't think it would be very challenging. It's basically like you have Thanos and he's the bad guy and everyone else is the good guy and they're trying to stop him, right? I also think the story is told in a very interesting way. There's like 20 main characters, so of course we had to split them up into tinier groups. And the movie cuts between these little adventures that every single group has very frequently, not too fast that you become disoriented or want more of the group you were following, but it doesn't take too long either so that you become bored of only seeing one group. Another film series that uses that strategy is Lord of the Rings. And my problem with Lord of the Rings is always that while watching the Aragorn scenes, I always just think like, yeah, get back to the hobbits now, will ya? They're the interesting part of the films. And this movie doesn't have that. I think every single group of people is as interesting as the others. And I think that's just really, really well done. It shows that the writers really knew what they were dealing with. The movie is also very funny. By now, that's something to be expected. When I go see a MCU film, I assume it's going to be funny, and in fact, if it isn't funny, I'm kind of disappointed. But this movie is like really, really funny. Obviously the Guardians of the Galaxy are funny, and teaming them up with Spider-Man and Iron Man just makes everything great. And then you've got Thor, who found his funny bone in Thor Ragnarok and put him into the mix, and yeah, everything's just filled with quips and jokes, and I really like that. Notable favourites of mine are when Peter Parker says, "Oh, we're using our made-up names. I'm Spider-Man." Then when Star-Lord gets jealous of Thor and disguises his voice, he's like, he's mocking me. And of course, the best part of the entire film, Why is Gamora? That never fails to make me laugh. But of course you can't talk about this film without mentioning the ending. So, spoilers, I guess. You can mute the video until the spoiler tag is gone. When I watched this movie for the first time in theaters on opening night, no one had seen the movie yet, and I think it came out in Belgium 2 days before it came out in America, so like no one had seen this movie yet. And the theater was packed. There wasn't a single seat that wasn't occupied. And when Thanos snapped, I had never been in a quieter theater. Everyone's jaw was on the floor. And then Bucky started disappearing and people gasped, and it was like a feeling of shock that overcame our theater. It was great. It was such a weird and cool experience. And then the credits started rolling and people couldn't believe what they just saw. And normally a couple of people leave before the mid-credit scene, but everyone stayed seated. No one left the theater until the place where the mid-credit scene would have been, but there wasn't it. And people were like, "What? No, there's not going to be a post-credit scene? Oh no!" And then, luckily, at the end of the credits, there was a post-credit scene, and everyone just let out a sigh of relief. Even though the post-credit scene wasn't that relieving, and even a bit confusing, because almost no one knew who Captain Marvel was, but yeah, that's okay. And I went to see it a second time. First time was with my brother, and the second time was with my friends. And I strategically chose my seat at the end of like our row of friends, and during the dusting I just looked at their faces instead of at the screen, because I loved seeing their reactions of shock and disbelief. It was incredible. And in front of us there was a guy who was sitting on the floor with like his hands on his head, and he was like, What? It was great. Anyway, that was my amazing theatre experience. And honestly, if I could choose to watch it again in a theatre with an unknowing audience, I would definitely do that. That was so great. Right, I guess back to the contents of the movie. Tom Holland. He's definitely one of my favourite parts of this film. I have many favourite parts, but Tom Holland is definitely one of them. He's very funny, and once again, a Spider-Man that is very relatable to me. He tries to impress Mr. Stark, and yeah, he just kind of, he's not really the focus. He's not supposed to be, but he kind of comes along with Tony, and yeah, I think that whole dynamic is pretty good, especially when Doctor Strange asks like, "What is he, your ward?" Yeah. Also the bit where he's like catching the Guardians of the Galaxy and he's like, "Oh, I can't remember anyone's name." That's great as well. My favourite bit might be when Tony like knights him as an Avenger, and then his expression, like, it's very good. He has an expression of like pure joy, and then he realizes the burden and the responsibility that comes with being an Avenger, and then he's like, oh, I have to behave. Right, let's continue our little graph. Spider-Man, or Peter Parker, would be 16 because it's been a year and a half since Homecoming. And that makes our graph look like this. For the first time, really, we have a big spike. The peak is, of course, the current war, where he plays someone much older than in his other films. I'm going to talk about spoilers again, so mute if you don't want any until the spoiler tag is gone. I've been keeping track of the amount of time Tom Holland dies in his movies, and so far we've only got one Tom Holland death, and I'm really split on whether or not I should add his death in this film, because he did die, right? He comes back in the next one, but he did die. There was a death scene, and he doesn't come back in this film, so I think I'm just going to add it. So that is 2 Tom Holland deaths in the Tom Holland-a-thon so far. So in conclusion, in case you couldn't tell, I really like this film. It's funny, it has some great action scenes, which I didn't even mention, but they are great. I could just watch them all day. It's got great humor, great characters, and of course a great ending, and all of that is why I'm giving this film, you ready? 10 out of 10. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't hide it. I love this film, I absolutely love it. It deserves a 10 out of 10. Next episode I'm going to be watching Avengers Endgame, so do join me for that, because you obviously want to see me gush about another perfect film, and I will see you then. Goodbye.